His last words were a strong statement. He wrote his name boldly at the top of the sheet. Dill pickles are sour but taste fine. Down that road is the way to the grain farmer. Either mud or dust are found at all times. The best method is to fix it in place with clips. If you mumble, your speech will be lost. At night, the alarm aroused him from a deep sleep. Read just what the meter says. Fill your pack with bright trinkets for the poor. Welcome back to the Passing Through podcast. I'm still in Hungary. I'm still on the farm. I'm about a third of the way through this permaculture internship, and it has been amazing so far. I'm looking forward to dedicating an episode to an update where I could go into explicit detail about all of the things we're doing and learning and share some stories, but that is going to have to wait until a solo episode, because today I have an interview for you with the lovely Kris DeDecker. Kris is creator and contributing author of Low Tech Magazine. We talk about low-tech solutions for high-tech problems, like heating people, not spaces, the importance of community and darkness, the impact modern technological conveniences have not just on our cognition, but on our ability to navigate the world and to connect to one another. We talk a bit about capitalism and consumerism, degrowth, and forging different futures with different stories. You'll even hear me make a faux pas about bathrooms and toilets. That's because in the US we generally use bathroom and toilet interchangeably, but here in Europe this difference is more clearly demarcated. All of us American swine shitting and bathing in the same room like savages. Kris is a wonderful person and an inspiration. He's walking the walk and talking the talk, trying to live a low-tech life and find the edges of what's possible in modern life. You can find Kris at lowtechmagazine.com. Lowtech Magazine's website runs on solar power, so it may not always be up. Check back if it's down. Otherwise, you could also find him at Lowtech Magazine on Instagram. This week's eco tip actually overlaps a bit with something Kris and I spoke about, which is in regards to heating. One thing that I'd bet a lot of people don't know is that compost piles, which are just basically heaps of organic matter piled up that begin to decompose, they generate heat. So we've actually put that into practice here. When we first arrived, it was cold and raining, and the temperature had dropped off in such a way that it was pretty fucking frigid, and the boiler for the showers was out. So we had no hot water to take a shower with. So knowing that compost can generate heat, we took a hose and we coiled it up like a rattlesnake, just wrapping it on itself over and over. And then we put that on a wooden pallet and we covered it in straw, hay, and fermenting apples, and a little bit of chicken shit. And you keep alternating the patterns, the carbon-rich straw and hay with the nitrogen-rich green material, like weeds and these apples and the chicken shit. And when you have the ideal balance of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and moisture, a chemical reaction starts to happen, and all of the organic material begins to decompose, and heat is released as part of that process. So this was kind of like a science experiment where we took these things, threw them in a big pile, and waited. And then when morning came and it was time to take a shower, I was amazed at how hot the water was. I thought someone was fucking with me and that this had secretly been hooked up to a boiler in the night, because it was proper warm. It was warm enough that I was ready to just leap out of the shower fully nude and start asking people where the boiler was. I needed to know who was responsible for this elaborate ruse. But it wasn't a ruse. It was real. And this is amazing. I guess this isn't an eco tip because I don't expect most listeners to have access to a heaping pile of straw, hay, and organic matter, unless you're on a farm or living in an eco village where you actually use this technology. But it's just an example. I'm mentioning this to help you realize that there are other ways of doing things. Because to me, it would have been unimaginable to think that, yeah, we could just put a whole bunch of straw and shit and green matter on top of in a pile and that we'd have warm water. This seemed like black magic to me, and it kind of still seems like black magic. To think that you can take a hot shower without electricity is a little bit mind-boggling. But surely this is what our ancestors must have been doing and must have figured out, because we have this technology still, we just don't generally use it. And there are so many kinds of examples of this. So this eco tip is just to kind of stimulate curiosity and get you to think of other ways to do things, to try to find what I've heard described as ancient futures, to think of ways that we can take technologies that people have been using for a long time and use them to help us live more sustainably and help us actually use the products that are around us, because the system that we live in is fairly wasteful. It encourages us to outsource certain things and rely on structures put in place by the system to dispose of waste, to manage it. And then all of these things just literally pile up in landfills or are shipped out to other parts of the world for them to deal with. And this isn't sustainable. This isn't a way for us to live in harmony with one another or nature. So be mindful of these things. Think about what other ways you could do simple things, because they're out there, and it requires a little bit of ingenuity, a little bit of know-how, a little bit of luck maybe, and just being willing to experiment. And so, yeah, that's the tip this week. Be good to one another, and I hope you enjoyed this talk with Kris. Kris de Decker, thank you for joining me today on the Passing Through podcast. It is an honor to have you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I just wanted to start off by asking you a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are now and what inspired you to found Low Tech Magazine and these sorts of things, just so listeners have some context about who you are and what your interests are.
Well, I started my career as a science and technology journalist for about 10 years when I was living in Belgium. It's where I grew up. And for 10 years, I was basically investigating all the high-tech innovation, the newest discoveries and knowledge, interviewing lots of scientists, engineers. And after like a decade, I started kind of losing my belief in technological solutions. And that was also the moment when I moved to Spain. So I met my girlfriend here in Barcelona, and I moved to Spain, and it got a bit hard to keep working for the newspapers and the magazines in Belgium. So that's when I started Low Tech Magazine, which is a magazine about technology, but then in a kind of different way, rather than talking about the newest technologies and the newest iPhone, which is nowadays about the only tech news you read in newspapers. I started to look to the past for inspiration. So there's this idea that technology somehow just started in the 20th century. So often when you read any book about technology, it starts with a little chapter on history, and then it usually starts like late 19th century, early 20th century, as if nothing happened before. of course, a lot of stuff happened before, and it's really it never ends. Every time I research some historical technology or way of doing things, there's five new ideas popping up, and I will never be able to write about everything that I want to write. So, and Low Tech Magazine by now is 17 years old, so it's quite a while, and I keep going.
Yeah, awesome. That's thank you for the context. That's great. I also share a similar kind of distaste for technology, as we were chatting a little bit before we started recording. So yeah, I'm happy that there are like-minded people out there that question whether or not technology is the way out of the situation that we're in right now. And for the people listening who hear this and they go, "Oh, okay, Low Tech Magazine, trying to have a low tech life." What does a day in the life for you look like, where you're actually trying to do this and find out where the boundary is and what's realistic from a low tech perspective? What does it look like?
Well, first of all, I'm not against technology, so it's more about trying to steer the evolution of technology in a different direction rather than say not using technology, because well, at the moment I'm using quite some technology, and on any day in my life I'm also probably every day on the laptop and connected to the internet. But there's several things in my life that I have tried to not use and succeeded in that. So, for instance, I don't have a smartphone. I really don't want to change that. So I have this dumb phone, which is already intrusive enough. I don't drive cars or even avoid very much to be a passenger in a car. So short distance, like daily transport, I do by bike. And if I travel through Europe, which I do quite a lot, I go by train, by bus, by boat. And then I also don't have a heating system or air conditioning system. So I kind of, well, first of all, it's expensive. And especially if you live in a building that's badly insulated. So yeah, I see some of my neighbors have air conditioning, electric heating, and they pay more on that than on the rent. But apart from the costs, I think that these kind of air conditioning, central heating give very uncomfortable indoor climates. And if you don't have it, you start experimenting with all kinds of alternative heating technologies. So I wrote a lot about that, partly based on scientific academic studies, but also a lot on my experience, like using hot water bottles, thermal underwear, those kind of things. So yeah, I try to live as low tech as possible, but I do at the same time realize, we are not living in the Middle Ages, so I cannot pretend to be in the Middle Ages. I'm in the 21st century, and if, for example, I want people to read my articles, I'm gonna have to use the technologies of today. Otherwise, it's not gonna be very useful. And then, of course, every person also has their kind of focus. Like I'm way more focused on energy production, energy demand than, for example, food and agriculture, which is something I have very little experience with.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I never write about it and not that it doesn't interest me, but it may come also. Over the 17 years that I wrote Low Tech Magazine, with hindsight, you now also see like, okay, those were the years that I was obsessed with transportation technology. Those were the years that I was writing about heating. It kind of evolves, and I'm someone who gets bored very easily, so I don't want to write about the same topic the whole time.
Yes. Understandable. And so the energy, that's a very interesting sector right now, because one of the many heads of the polycrisis that we're facing is an energy crisis.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there was something you wanted people to know about energy, whether it's a surprising fact or something that you think could empower people or something people should question. Are there certain things like that that you like to share and have people think about?
Yeah, I think the main one is that you can have a modern life and a modern society with a fraction of the energy that we use now. For example, to come back to the heating, which is a huge, especially in Europe, it's like kind of almost 1/3 of total energy use, I think. If you heat people rather than in spaces, it's you can be comfortable with very little energy, and you can actually be more comfortable than in a central heated apartment. And it's not just heating, it's about anything. Like we have this idea that modern life equals a huge consumption of fossil fuels, but if you are a bit smart about it, I mean the humans, not the machines, then that's not really the problem. The problem is more in the excess and in the commercial motives than in the modern society itself. And for I mean, like a bicycle is also a product of the industrial revolution, but it obviously doesn't have the same problems as a car. And even if you look at the car itself, if you look at the evolution of the car, yeah, the car from the 1970s and the car of today are completely different sizes, weight, the electronics inside. If you build a car like you built in the 1970s, but you put the energy efficient engine of today in such an old car, yeah, then cars kind of stop being such a huge energy guzzlers. So there's many ways to kind of play with this idea of what is modern technology, what is high tech, what is low tech, while people often have this idea that there's only two possibilities. Either you go high tech to the extreme or you go back to the Stone Age. And what I'm trying to do with most of my work is to show that, well, no, there's thousands of possibilities in between.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a great point because it does seem that our entire society is predicated on intensive energy consumption. It seems to be that that's what we associate convenience and luxury and ease with. You know, an air-conditioned home, a well-heated home, a big refrigerator, all of your TVs and screens and computers and gadgets, always electrified, always being charged, always being used. And to me, this this is really kind of a mindset that's problematic, that encourages the cycle of consumption and usage. And even renewables are something that, to me, I question the feasibility and sustainability of them, because at the end of the day, they're additive, right? They are something we're
Yes.
putting on top of existing energy structures, and the Earth doesn't want more electricity. We do.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole idea that you can simply switch from fossil fuels to renewables and then everything is solved, it makes totally no sense. I mean, to start with, the solar panels and wind turbines, they don't float. I mean, you don't fish them out of the sea. You have to produce them, you have to mine the materials, you have to build the factories, transport everything. It's toxic, can't recycle them. So I'm not against wind power and solar power, obviously not. But the way that it is kind of inserted into an economical system, yeah, then it's never gonna bring any solution. So one thing we could do is, like, one thing you can learn from the past is that people used wind energy and solar energy without producing electricity. So if you hang your laundry outside to dry, then it's solar energy and wind energy drying your laundry, but there's no machines or electricity involved. Or if you want to saw some wood, well, you can do that with the electricity, but you can also build a water mill or a windmill where the mechanics is directly connected to the tool, to the saw, and you don't need to have all these high tech in between. And if you use the electric versions like I do, I mean, next to me are my solar panels, but then you have to lower your energy use and not just the typical air conditioned home with the big screens and everything you just explained, and then solve it, so called solve it, by putting solar panels on the roof. And then there's the issue of energy storage, because that is usually something that is forgotten. So yeah, there's no sun at night, the wind doesn't blow, and there you see that the energy invested but also the costs for the energy storage are way bigger than for the solar panels or the wind turbine. So another part of the solution is also to limit energy storage and kind of adjust demand to the supply of energy. And that's exactly what happened in earlier days with sailboats and traditional windmills. They only worked when there was winter available. So there's a lot to learn from renewable energies in the past, and we do everything wrong now.
Yeah. I like this concept because actually right now I'm taking a food forestry course for the last 3 days, and the instructor, he's a permaculture legend, this guy Jeff Lawton. He was talking about how our ancestors, they had a lot of these technologies, like what you just described, using the sun, using the wind, using water for energy. They didn't have all these fancy tools that we have now, and they survived. They did okay, or else we wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So this idea that these new technologies somehow make us superior or better, I think that's a little bit of a misguided notion that we have as a global people.
Yeah, and on top of that, of course, one thing that is sure, it's temporary. I mean, a whole lifestyle built on fossil fuels, which is not a renewable fuel, at least not in a time period that is valid for us. You cannot build something sustainable on something that is finite. I mean, there's a finite number of volume of fossil fuel. Of course, we will cook the earth before we ever burn it all, but yeah.
Yeah.
So you could argue like, okay, being alive in this time is probably, it's great. If you have like, you can go kite surfing, you can go climb mountains, you can see the whole world. It's in no time, you can fly everywhere. These are things that people could not do before, but it's something that will last for maybe a few decades more, and then it's back to zero. And not back to the 19th century, but way further, because we forgot to do all these things without fossil fuels. So we have lost so much knowledge.
Yeah, that's an amazing point, and a frightening idea that a lot of these things, even people out here, were talking about something as simple as canning and jarring food, and how this technique and this technology is being lost because the elderly people who relied on this to actually get through a winter are dying, and people don't know how to do this anymore. They don't care about it. And I wonder what other technologies and abilities that we lose as a species when we kind of atrophy with this technology. That's like the dark side of it, right? We use these things and now we can't remember more than 2 or 3 phone numbers. We don't know how to get from point A to point B without loading up Google
Yeah,
Maps. And so,
that's a very good example.
yeah. So I wonder what kind of things come to your mind as technologies or techniques or abilities that have been lost as a result of a lack of practice, let's say, or lack of passing those traditions down.
Yeah, basically everything. I like the example of the navigation. Like, so I said, I never owned a smartphone, so I never lost my ability to navigate place. And when I'm traveling together with people, I have so much fun looking how they do it. Like the phone comes up, and then they look at the phone and they follow the phone, and often they get lost because what Google also doesn't always know or they send you through some slum area which is dangerous, or it's just the shortest route. While if you just look around you, you see like, okay, we shouldn't go there, and you see maybe a tower of a church, and you go like, okay, the center is probably there. So people just forget that you can orientate yourself in a city by looking at the landmarks, for example, or just kind of reading the environment and seeing where people go, or maybe just asking someone. And these are things that it's a very good example because it's just maybe 10 years that we have this ability on our phone, and people have completely lost the skills to navigate without it.
Yes.
And so imagine other things like just walking from somewhere that is like, people still walk a couple of kilometers at most, but If you read about the Middle Ages, for example, and you read about I don't know, some person, they were traveling a lot, but they were walking from Paris to Rome, and that is something that I think it's to me it sounds extremely attractive to travel in that way. Like I already noticed it by train, that which is another example, by the way. Like traveling by train in Europe, it's possible, but you really need to know how it works. And then if you let someone else order the tickets, things go wrong. But yeah, what other skills? I don't know. Reading, reading people, which is something for me. It's quite problematic that people stopped reading longer text, because I write my text only get longer, and people don't read don't read anymore. But obviously, everything about food production, you can argue it's the main thing, the most important thing in the world. Food,
Yes.
Water. How do you get safe water to drink? How do you filter water? How do you make sure that you have enough food in the house? If you look into the food distribution chain, which is largely refrigerated, and you see how that works, and you see how vulnerable that is, then wow. If something happens there, then yeah, many people are gonna die within a few weeks, because
Yes.
there is very limited kind of reserve supply, while 2 centuries ago, any house had enough foodstuff ready for many months. Probably some animals around that they could slaughter if necessary. They had a kitchen garden.
Yeah.
They had neighbors. They had a community network where everybody had their own kind of speciality and could help each other. So that's also lost, especially in a city. In villages, you still find it, but in a city, yeah.
Yeah, that parallels really nicely with something that I heard you say in Rachel Donald's podcast, where you were drawing a parallel between that kind of phenomenon and energy. So, like, not just a dependence on food production and the global food supply chain, but most of our energy doesn't really make us very resilient on a local level.
No, not for sure, not.
And is there a way, because the food insecurity, the energy problem, all of these things they kind of fit together and they influence one another. But are there things that you think people could do to make themselves more resilient, short of, going out, taking gardening courses, reading more, getting more practical experience with things? But things like energy are interesting because often the municipality or a state is intervening and telling you that these are your options, and so you have less choice and less agency.
Yeah, I think that's a problem. I mean, you can do things, but then you quickly end up in the kind of the prepper culture. Like you stuff your basement if you have it. I don't have it. You stuff your basement full of food stuff, of cans, lots of guns and munition. I don't know. I don't do that. If everything stops, I'm also gonna be dead. I think it's more interesting to see why everything works like that. And that's, of course, because of how our economic system works and how everything has globalized. You have global capitalism. And in 30 years, it became, when I was a child or a teenager, it was not like that yet. But now capital moves around the globe and wants to multiply. So that's basically the consequences. That's why everything becomes ever more large scale, less local. Why we buy, I mean, I know people who buy bathroom furniture through Amazon. You go to the restaurant and the menu card is a QR code and the server is in Los Angeles. That's crazy. I mean, but it's the consequence of a commercial model that just wants to increase profit and capital. And so you can try to fight that on your own, but it's not. Yeah, you have limited options there. And I mean, here I kind of escaped. I ran away from Belgium because it's just not my country. I was just born there. But anyway, if so, I kind of escaped the problem of all these legal requirements about homes that are now being pushed onto kind of the whole Europe in terms of heat insulation and stuff like that. Well, first, what they're doing is they make housing even more expensive, because all these solutions like triple glazed windows, 20 centimeter of insulation, heat pumps, that's all, it's very expensive, so most people cannot afford that. Second, it doesn't really help because you invest almost as much energy in these things as you save with them. And then, yeah, there are other ways, like you can heat people instead of spaces. But if you want to do that in Belgium, some expert is going to pass by and is going to tell you, well, great, but that's not allowed. It doesn't count for us. You're going to have to insulate your house. So, as you say, the law pushes you into a high tech direction.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to do it low tech, then your only option is basically to go to a more low tech country, or in the case of heating, to Spain, where you don't need so much heating.
Mm.
And so I know people are often want to know what they can do themselves. And you can do things like you can stop driving cars and have an heating system. But also don't forget that for some people, it's way easier to do that than for others. I mean, in my case, it's kind of useful because I write about it. That's why I keep losing. I spent entire days in trains and on bikes. Because that's my thing. But if you have another job and you have children and I don't know, someone to take care of, it's going to be harder to say, well, then I'm going to go by bike to take care of grandma 20 kilometers further. And then I go pick up my kids. And then, no, you're going to get into the car unless there is public transport, it's worth its name. But you don't control that. You cannot say, I mean, I have an example here in Belgium. My parents, they live outside the city, and there used to be a bus that it didn't stop in front of their door, but then there was a 20-minute walk left. Well, one day, a couple of years ago, the government decided, well, public transport, too much money. They got rid of the bus. So you have a whole town that is now forced into their cars. And my parents have to pick me up now by car, which they know I hate, just to visit them. So that's where you end up with what can you do yourself. So yeah, it's complicated. And also in terms of solutions, like, how do you kind of raise hope that it's going to change if the problems are on such a high level? Like, you can kind of say, like, okay, I buy a set of thermal underwear and I lower the heating, which is great. And you do contribute to the solution. But how to overthrow global capitalism, it's kind of a bigger challenge, I think.
Yes. Yeah. Why haven't we figured that out yet? What's so hard about that?
We have social media to talk to each other, but it's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess because more often than not, it seems like social media is also co-opted by these big structures, by these companies, by these political structures, and then they become more of a distraction and an agent of oppression than actually democratization or mobilization.
Yes. Yeah, I basically stopped using social media. Yeah, I just cannot take it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. There was something I wanted to go back to that you mentioned earlier, some minutes ago, about community, because that's an important thing for me. And not only in the sense that it makes people more resilient together because we're stronger if we're supporting one another, but everybody has diverse skills and needs, and they can help one another in unique ways. So you get this really beautiful kind of system. And I was wondering how you perceive community and what the value is, and maybe how people can leverage community better, if you have ideas on that topic.
Yeah, actually, it's a topic at the moment. So I just published one article about public bathhouses, and it's a kind of the start of a series. So I did a lot of research on kind of communal housekeeping. Like, we're always looking for solutions that can be applied individually, It's in our culture. I mean, that's what modern life is all about. It's about individuals. But of course, there's a lot of things that you could organize communally, and that's a, actually a kind of third way to lower energy use. So you can switch to renewables, you can use more energy efficient devices, but you can also kind of share resources. And to stick with the example of the public bathroom, basically that's what it is. But then in a very big, well, or maybe not that big, but they can be of any scale. What are the advantages? That first, we all win some space in our apartments and our houses, because my bathroom takes up like at least I don't know 1/6 of the apartment. That could become an extra room that would be very welcome. Second, you create obviously more social interaction if the whole either the whole building or the whole neighborhood goes to a bathhouse where you meet each other, and where you maybe even bathe together. So there's different types of bathhouse. It can be showers, compartmentalized, or it can be like the ancient Romans all together in a pool. I'm not going to decide on that. And it doesn't stop there, because obviously, it's way more energy efficient, resource efficient to build one big bathroom for everybody than 1,000 bathrooms for every household separately. And that's operational energy use, it's embodied energy use, building the whole stuff. And what's also very important is that when you cluster all these kind of bathrooms in one building, then it becomes pretty doable to only use renewable energy. So you don't need fossil fuels anymore. The focus is now, for example, if you're talking about hot water for showers and stuff like that, washing machines, every house needs a kind of solar thermal collector on the roof. Yeah, okay. But if you build a bathhouse and then you have way more space and you need way less solar collectors to produce the hot water. So it's way more realistic to do it in a communal way than on every building separately. And even, I mean, it's not even possible in many examples. Like if it's a flat of 20 floors, obviously the roof space is not sufficient to put enough solar collectors for everyone. And what goes for the bathhouse, for the bathroom, also goes for the kitchen. It goes for the laundry room. All these appliances that use so much energy are actually the ones that could be, I have to watch my words, but collectivized or made communal, because there's a huge danger, especially in the US, when you name things communal or public, that it's associated with the Soviet Union. But if you look at the history, and I'm still going to write about this, then you see that in late 19th century, actually, America was way more communist than Russia.
Yeah.
So it's kind of it's a bit weird. But anyway, organizing things communal is a big part of the solution. At the same time, it also shows why it gets very little attention, because from the moment you start to do things together, you're really damaging profit.
Yes.
And capitalism, because it's obviously way more profitable to build 1,000 luxury bathrooms in every household than one nice bathhouse in every neighborhood. And it goes for everything else. And that's why here in this apartment with 18 apartments, we have 17 vacuum cleaners, because I don't have one. That's ridiculous, but that's how it works. And nobody kind of questions that, because that's how we are raised. Like, you need your own stuff and you're not going to share.
Yeah.
Of course, if you look at history before the Industrial Revolution and even earlier decades of the Industrial Revolution, you see this cooperation everywhere, in villages, in towns. And so it's something to put on the agenda, I think, and to kind of try to disentangle it from the political, how you call this, red baiting, or kind of this association with the Soviet Union, which actually the Soviet Union in terms of communal housekeeping was a big mess. And I would have expected that to find inspiration there, but they completely they did it really wrong. So there's better way.
Yeah, I love everything that you just said. It's really resonates strongly with me. The lifeblood of capitalism is this belief of separation, individuality, your unique needs and desires, your own comforts, and all of this stuff. So, yeah, I love that you're drawing attention to this. But there was one thing I wanted to say about this idea of this collective bathroom and bathhouse, which I really love, is that I think if we did something like that, it might be more feasible to actually collect that waste as compost and use it for agriculture and cut out another wasteful use of energy where we're, putting industrial fertilizers and growing all of our stuff like this. If we had everyone coming together and shitting collectively in the same place, we could actually
Yeah,
use that stuff. It's not a waste substance at that point. It's actually very valuable.
true. But I was actually, and that's maybe lost in translation, but I was talking about the
Bathing.
shower and the bath. Yeah, bathing.
Yeah.
So that's so it's a bathroom and a bathing room.
Yeah, we I thought you were talking about both, but you were just talking about bathing.
Well, actually, I didn't write about the toilet as I would say it in English, but the Romans also did that together in quite luxury circumstances. But no, I was talking about showers and baths. Baths. Yeah. Well, sorry, my English. After 17 years in Spain, my English really got corrupted.
No, your English is excellent. It's my interpretation there. I thought we were having like a one-stop shop for showering, bathing, going to
No,
the
but it makes
bathroom.
sense. It does make sense. I mean, to also get that out of it just don't put it too far away because it's usually something you visit quite often.
Yes.
While a shower, it's probably just once a day, or it can be a bit farther away. But no, what you said about recycling is human waste is very much true. It's that's an ecological disaster. I mean, you can combine the practicality of the kind of flushing it away, which is obviously more practical than storing it, with the vacuum toilet, which we still use on airplanes and trains and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And it was actually designed for that late 19th century by an engineer who was like, okay, great, this flush toilet, but you're kind of wasting all these valuable materials that we need to restore the fertility of our soil.
Mm-hmm.
So he designed a system that you don't mix it with water and that it can be collected and brought back to the fields. And it kind of worked for several decades in Dutch cities. But yeah, eventually they're all flushing it away with water now.
Yeah, that's really tragic. I agree. It is a disaster because it's just a hole in the nutrient cycle where that's not the way that nature designed things. It isn't that you just
No,
you eat some food that grows out of the ground and then take that waste and just get it out of the system. It's supposed to go back into the system and be recycled. So yeah.
but that's our whole economic system. So I mean, I like we used to do the laundry with urine, with pee.
Hmm.
Yeah, so
I don't know about this.
that was basically the soap to wash the linen or the linen. I
Oh.
now I start doubting every word I pronounce, but that's that's basically for most of history. That was how people cleaned the clothes and the sheets and everything. So the pee was kind of fermented, and then it was used to get out the grease and everything.
Hmm.
So yeah, if you look at pre-industrial society, everything was circular. So there's all this talk about circular economy, and yeah, it's so laughable because it's where we come from,
Mm-hmm.
and how the concept is kind of defined now has nothing to do with that. It was really radical in pre-industrial times, and now basically everything is linear. Like whatever we do, yeah, there's basically nothing recycled or reused.
Yeah, everything is kind of single use, disposable, one time only. And it's a very short sighted way of thinking about things because all of those things, they add up and they have to be dealt with. You can't just keep pushing them under the rug indefinitely.
Yeah, but they bring also new commercial opportunities. So if you produce lots of plastic waste, you can then go like build ovens to burn the plastic waste or recycle it into shitty materials. Or I mean, there's always there's always a commercial opportunity. They kind
Yeah.
of multiply. The more you do things linearly, the more commercial options appear.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder what the way out of that is. Because I see that, and you're exactly right, and that's why it exists, is because it's profitable, and profits seem to be the the end of everything, the end which justifies all means. And it seems like we need like a very radical mindset shift where we move away from this way of thinking, and that's the only way maybe to change these things. But that's a huge task. That's a huge undertaking to change
Yes.
people's minds in that way.
Yeah, so that is a question I often get, and then I don't really have an answer there. Um, it's pretty clear what needs to be done, and I think there's many people also saying the same things. It's not just me saying these things, you know. I mean, but how do you get there? And that is really hard because let's say the enemy, or yeah, is extremely powerful, and so how do you go against it? I mean, I'm also like now with the war in the Middle East, like if you see what Israel is doing, and I'm not here to talk about the politics of it, but just the technology, how the power that the state has
Yes.
over anyone else, yeah, it's like you cannot do anything anymore. How do you overthrow a society like that? How do you change a society like that if the people that have the power have so powerful technologies at their disposal?
Yeah, to be able to put explosives and consumer electronics and distribute those
For
to a foreign
example,
country and detonate them is pretty extreme.
yeah, but now okay, now it's Hezbollah, but who knows who's next? You know, if you see how climate activists are being treated in the UK and put in prison, and you're being like, okay, these people are trying to do something, but they end up in jail, and that's why I don't have a solution. I mean, I've also read about history of violent revolutions, but they usually don't end well either. So it's very hard to kind of propose any solution. I mean, I don't. Yeah, sorry.
No, yeah, it's I agree. I'm always coming up against the wall at this point in the discussion, and um it's frustrating because it's something that we need, and it's visible to some people and not to others, and the dangers are real and they're there, and humans are so good at story. Like it's before language, I mean before written language, the oral tradition was how we it was our greatest technology. It was how we communicated with one another, how we explained things, how we told stories, and our mythology made sense of the world. And it seems like in modernity, somehow story got used to deceive us into doing the things that are happening now. And a lot of us think that it's good and it's fine and there's no consequences. And it seems like maybe story is the way out of it. But
Yes.
it's frustrating because I don't have a compelling story. It's like what you're saying, we're up against odds that are seemingly insurmountable. It's like in Star Wars, going up to destroy the Death Star, and you have the little rebel alliance, and they're small and weak. And it's the situation seems more dire than that, actually. But um, yeah, I don't know what the answer is either.
Yeah. So I have very much the feeling that what I'm doing with Low Tech Magazine is a kind of mm, it's a kind of utopian project, and in the sense that yeah, voluntarily, it's not. I mean, it's not that there's people kind of following the ideas and practicing them, but there's not enough of them to make a really big change. But I think that's a bit missing in our society now. It's like to present a future that is attractive and different,
Yes.
because people have this idea that when you kind of escape, when we let go of the system that we have now, we're gonna end up dying 25 years old. It's gonna be a horrible world, inconvenient, cold, and whatever. But if you show that with different values and technologies and stories, there's actually some kind of modern society. I mean, modern in the sense that not going back to the Stone Age, that it's possible within the limits of the environment. I mean, I recently had a reader who got mad and who told me to write about degrowth rather than low tech, and to explain how we should get there. And I was like, yeah, no, because I don't believe it's going to happen voluntarily. So at the same time, and that's why I would not call it hopeless. I mean, things are happening. If you look in recent years, the disasters that climate change have brought upon, basically the whole world, there's little doubt about climate change anymore. And the same will happen with other things. More disasters will come, and I think like exploding devices are also not really encouraging people to love their smartphone. You know, they put it a bit further away now.
Yeah.
And also what I noticed, and that's why it's not completely hopeless, I think, like in the 17 years that I write at Low Tech Magazine, in the beginning years, people laughed at me. I got aggressive comments on talks, and that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, I've worked with scientists now. I'm really not in the position that I was then, and I don't have to take all this abuse anymore that I got in the earlier years. So people kind of followed that. And I'm not going to say it's because of me, but in general, about the feeling, and I think smartphones have a lot to do with it, that technology is taking over, and that technology is not just good, but also bad. Like, everybody knows that they're addicted to their smartphone, and almost everybody I kind of question about it, they go like, yeah, I wish I could let go of it, but they can't, for many reasons. For example, because your boss wants you to have a smartphone, and then it ends there. Or of course, you could do like you and leave your job behind and start a new life. I would definitely not advise against that. But so I think technological evolution got to a point where actually it's not so clear anymore what all this progress actually brings us.
Mm-hmm.
And before, if you look at the 20th century, many of those inventions, they were really like, wow, this is cool. But now, I don't know, there's very little to get enthusiastic about, and it's all concentrated in one kind of sector. It's communication technology. That's where all the progress is. And for the rest, we are still using technologies that are basically from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. I mean, the car has been around for a while, central heating. It's all kind of same story, you know?
Yeah. Where are the technologies that they promised us of flying cars and not having to work anymore, and robots are just cleaning our homes, and we're just having all of this leisure time to do the things that we love and we enjoy? It seemed like
Actually, we could have that now. We have so much automated production capacity that we could actually do that. But we don't, because we have to increase the profit and the capital. So
yeah, exactly. These technologies became used to actually exploit the workforce instead of liberate it.
yes. And that's why I'm not against technology, or it's just that the way it's used, the whole context in which it is used, that's the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a related thought to this that I also sometimes wrestle with. You know, there are these kind of sticky points in these kind of conversations. And one of them we already spoke about what do we do? What are we up against? How do we change these powerful structures? And then the other is, if we are advocating these types of things and we're telling people, hey, scale back, low tech solutions, the buzzwords like degrowth, people hear this, and people who have been there, I like to use an analogy of like, there's a bunch of people watching, a bunch of hungry people watching a bunch of people sitting down at a table having a beautiful Thanksgiving dinner with huge turkeys and brownies and pies and all kind of things. And then those people at the table, once the hungry people have their turn where they're about to come up and be able to sit down, we say, sorry, dinner's closed. We're all eating insects now. we're changing. We have to stop this. You don't get you're not able to do this anymore. We have to stop. The planet is in danger. And part of me feels like if I was the hungry person, I would feel like, what? How how is that okay? Like it would be almost impossible to convince me of a story where I would agree to just sit down and eat a bunch of crickets, even though I'm in favor of eating bugs and diversifying our food chain, and they're full of protein. Why not? But in that moment when I'm hungry and I, and I'm talking this analogy here, I'm talking about the global South and the people who have been exploited and denied their seat at the table. How do we get them on board with this kind of thing? Because I think that's going to be important.
Yeah, there's this concept or idea of human development. So kind of the idea is that everybody in the world needs to be kind of get to our standard, but it's a lie, because we need poor people to have the rich standard that we have. So if everybody would be in a similar situation as us, who is going to go into the coal mine and dig out the coal? Well, everyone's going to say, well, no, thanks. I'd rather stay at my laptop. And well, then there's no more coal. So you need poor people. You need people who are desperate to keep this whole thing running. So putting the idea in front of them that one day you will come to our standards of living, it's a lie. So, and obviously in terms of resource use, what the industrialized richer nations should do is to lower their resource consumption. And on the other side, they can raise it. Obviously, I mean, we take too much and they have too little, and that is also kind of in a kind of more just way to share the resources, and not that one half of or even less of the planet is taking everything and using the others as slaves to kind of continue their luxury life. Obviously, people in the global South, they have an idea of the Western society that is also not very realistic. They see all the good stuff, but they are not confronted with all the bad stuff and the alienation and the homeless people and so on. The drug abuse, all these consequences of how we organize society. Oh, you're in the dark suddenly.
You can't see me anymore.
Yeah, well, I do, but I see a difference.
Yeah. The sun is starting to go down here in the van, and there's just
Okay.
like this little. I could maybe open up the curtains a little bit. I don't know if it helps.
No, it's okay to do a podcast in the dark.
Being a guest on this show is an interesting thing because it's a little bit unusual podcasting style. So,
but it's another good example. Darkness. I mean, some years ago I went to the Pyrenees here, the mountain range, and I saw for the first time in my life the Milky Way, and I was amazed by this thing. Like, wow, why did I never see this before? Well, because of all the light pollution. And then I think, why are we all kind of addicted and glued to our screens? Yeah, because we used to be glued to the sky and watch the stars all evening, which is much more amazing than anything you could see on a screen. It's just it's gone. So we need a bit more darkness also.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because it is such a spectacular and almost mystical, supernatural feeling experience to really look up and see the sky just splattered with stars like that and the glowing Milky Way. It's incredible to feel your insignificance in that moment, but also at the same time your connectedness to this vast, crazy cosmos that we're in.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very true. So yeah, beautiful, beautiful observation there. And I know we're coming up towards time here, so I want to be mindful of that and just give you the floor in terms of like if there's any final thoughts that you had or anything that was passing through. Doesn't have to be a fully formed thought, just kind of what's alive in you at the moment, and then also where people can find you and learn more about what you do and your message and read your articles and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm always bad at these things. I mean, to what's in my mind, I don't know. I read a lot of books. That would be my first advice. As a journalist of 30 years, I very much miss the pre-internet times when you had really good newspapers. Like what I did in my 20s was I bought 5 newspapers a day, and I was reading for hours, always different newspapers, and I was way better informed than I'm now. And I find it really annoying to have to follow the news. Like it's constantly evolving, and it doesn't really improve the reporting because, like, I don't know, something happens. There's like when these devices exploded in Lebanon, there was like at a certain moment, the first minutes, it was like solar panels exploded and all kinds of different devices. Well, no, it was not the case. And if you have like a newspaper every 24 hours, the journalists have the time to kind of check out what is right, what is wrong, what is just not correct. They can think, they can analyze things better, and you're way better informed. And I think one of the problems that nowadays, and it's a paradoxical because the internet was supposed to inform us better than we were, but it's totally the opposite. And I really miss those times. Because now there's still newspapers, but they're just not the same quality as they were. And I already experienced that during my career at the newspaper, that every year our articles had to become shorter and shorter and shorter. And where it ends with very short things that don't teach you anything. So while Low Tech Magazine is very much like a kind of about sustainability, energy, historical context, awareness. So basically what I do with every article is I put the topic in a wide historical context, as wide as possible. And from the moment you do that, you get very different solutions. That's the secret of Low Tech Magazine. It's not more than that. And now I lost my thread, actually.
That's fine because it was passing through, and sometimes it passes through, and some of it gets stuck.
Yeah, okay.
That's the beauty of the mind and our human experience. So,
what I said earlier, like every time I'm researching a topic, there's at least five topics popping up, and then I have to stop myself not to jump into the new topic. And so I'm one of these people who has like a whole mountain of articles in progress, and rather than finishing an article, I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't know anything about that, and I'm gone again. So
I know the feeling. Yes.
So yeah, passing through is really it's a good description of myself.
And where can people find you? Just to close out.
So yeah, I have a website. It's called Low Tech Magazine. Low Tech Magazine. It's not always online because it's solar powered and it has a very small battery. So usually it gets through the night. That's for the readers in the US because otherwise, they have to get up very early. But if it's bad weather, then it goes down. But don't worry, it will come back when the sun shines. And otherwise, social media. My colleague is now Marie. She's doing the Instagram. I'm having the LinkedIn. The rest is kind of, I stopped using them. So if you want to follow new articles, I think the best you can do is to subscribe to the newsletter, because I also learned that newsletters are more reliable than you spend years of your life trying to get 10,000 followers and then something changes and they're all gone. And we also have books. So it's called the Printed Website. And it's basically the whole archives of Low Tech Magazine in print form. And there's a Patreon to support us, where you also get some other stuff like postcards and stickers and every article printed in your mailbox. Stuff like that. Yeah, be welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Kris. This was a true honor. You are an inspiration to me. I know earlier you were talking about how early in this game people were kind of dismissive or laughing and stuff like that, which it breaks my heart a little bit, because to me, you're one of those people that's actually doing the thing and trying to make a difference. And it was a joy to talk to you today. And yeah, I love everything that you do. And thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.